Across the continental United States, most people are familiar with a particular set of wildlife, but the country is home to far more unusual species than many people realize. In this video, we're going to look at some of the most surprising native species to the lower 48. Flamingos are generally associated with the tropics, like the Caribbean, Central America, or the salt flats of Africa and South America, rather than with anything in the continental United States. But there is a native population in the US. Historically, American flamingos lived in South Florida, including the Everglades and the Florida Keys. By the early 20th century, they were largely wiped out in the region through hunting and habitat loss. However, in the 1950s and 1960s, occasional solo birds began showing up again. These sightings were usually written off as simply being escapees from zoos or roadside attractions, which made sense at the time because no one expected wild flamingos to return by themselves. Through the 1970s and 1980s, more birds were reported, and biologists eventually noticed that many of them did not have clipped wings or tags, like one would expect from birds that had escaped from captivity. Finally, in the 2010s, tracking studies proved that several flamingos visiting Florida had in fact migrated naturally from Mexico and Cuba. And when a seasonal gathering in Florida Bay began drawing dozens of birds at a time in some years, their suspicions seemed confirmed. Wild flamingos have slowly been returning to their old range in the United States, and they now appear regularly in parts of the Everglades and the Florida Keys, although a fully established breeding population has yet to be documented. Flamingos also turn up far beyond Florida. They're strong flyers that can travel long distances along the Atlantic coast, especially when storms push them inland or northward. In 2023, a major hurricane carried flamingos up the eastern seaboard and scattered them across multiple states. That event produced sightings in Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, and even as far north as Connecticut. Individual birds frequently show up in states closer to Florida as well, such as coastal Texas and the Carolinas. Parrots also feel like a tropical group with no real place in the continental United States, but the country actually has a deep history with them. The most striking example was the Carolina parakeet, a bright green bird with a yellow and red head that once ranged from the Great Plains to the eastern seaboard. It lived in old-growth forests, gathered in huge flocks, and was familiar to settlers and indigenous communities alike. By the early 20th century, it was gone, becoming one of the most famous bird extinctions in North America. Today, most of the parrots people see in the US are feral. Cities like Miami, Los Angeles, Houston, and Phoenix have thriving populations of escapees that have learned to live in parks, suburbs, and even downtown neighborhoods. Some of these birds are large and unmistakable, like the macaws that live in Miami. Others, such as monk parakeets, rose-ringed parakeets, and various lovebird species, have built lasting colonies after decades of escapes or releases from the pet trade. The mountains of Arizona and New Mexico were also home to a native species of parrot as well. The thick-billed parrot ranged from the high forests of southern Mexico up into the American Southwest, where flocks fed on pine seeds and nested in old woodpecker cavities. Its disappearance from the United States in the early 1900s was driven by a mix of pressures, including heavy hunting as the birds were seen as pests, and widespread habitat loss. By the time conservationists began paying attention, the species had already been extirpated from the United States. Despite reintroduction efforts in the 1980s and 1990s, the parrots were unable to adapt to the fragmented habitat of the region, and many were eaten by hawks before they had a chance to establish themselves. Today, the thick-billed parrot is limited to Mexico. But there is one species of native parrot that still survives in the lower 48, the green parakeet. This species lives along the lower Rio Grande in coastal Texas, where small flocks move freely across the border and gather loudly in towns like Brownsville and McAllen. Here, these birds are part of the natural regional fauna. However, the species also appears as a feral bird in several other major cities, including San Antonio, Houston, and Miami, where it blends into the broader patchwork of introduced parrots now scattered across the United States. There are 3 species of wild cat that are well known from the US: the bobcat, the Canada lynx, and the mountain lion. But the southern edge of the country, especially Texas and Arizona, is part of a broader cat landscape that stretches deep into Central and South America, and as a result, several more tropical cat species can still be found there. The ocelot survives in pockets of South Texas, especially in the thorn scrub near the Mexican border. It's the only one of the smaller neotropical cats with a confirmed breeding presence in the United States today. The jaguarundi, a long, sleek, weasel-shaped cat, used to occur in southern Texas as well, but it has been absent for decades and is now considered extirpated from the country. However, sightings in the American South are still reported occasionally, though whether these are really jaguarundis or other misidentified species hasn't been determined. The margay is even more elusive. It prefers dense, humid forests in Mexico and Central America and is not known to have a modern breeding population in the United States. But in the 1850s, there was one record of a margay cat being found in Texas. The largest and most surprising cat of the United States is the jaguar. They were once native to the American Southwest, ranging into Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. After more than a century of near absence, individual males have started appearing again, moving north from the mountains of Sonora. Trail cameras in Arizona have captured several jaguars over the past few decades, raising hopes that the species may make a comeback in the United States. Over the last 30 years, at least 7 different jaguars have been recorded crossing the border from Mexico into the US. Coatis are generally associated with Central or South America, so many people are surprised to learn that they're also native to the United States. The white-nosed coati is a long-snouted, ring-tailed member of the raccoon family that normally lives in tropical forests and mountain woodlands. It can also be found in the US, right at the northern edge of its distribution, though only one region reliably supports a natural population: southeastern Arizona. The best-known American coatis live in the Sky Island mountain ranges near Tucson, including the Santa Rita, Huachuca, and Chiricahua mountains. These isolated ranges rise high enough to create cooler, forested habitats similar to what coatis use further south. Small groups move through canyons and oak woodlands, and sightings are common enough that biologists consider this a stable, long-term native population. New Mexico occasionally has coati records as well, mostly near the border, but no breeding population has been confirmed there. The coatis are also sometimes seen in Texas, but its status is different. Historically, the species did occur in the state, and 19th century naturalists documented them in the Rio Grande Valley. Since then, coatis in Texas have been extremely rare, with scattered reports that may represent wanderers from Mexico, released animals, or short-lived groups that never became established. For now, Texas isn't considered to have a confirmed native population. Occasionally, young males disperse even farther north. Individuals have also been spotted in Utah, Colorado, and Arkansas. Peccaries look like wild pigs at first glance, but they're in a different family of hoofed animals that evolved in the Americas. Most people associate them with the tropics of Central and South America, yet one species, the collared peccary, has long been part of the native wildlife of the continental United States. The collared peccary lives in the deserts, scrublands, and open woodlands of the Southwest. Its core U.S. range includes Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, especially in areas of thorn scrub, mesquite, and saguaro-covered foothills. In Arizona in particular, they're a common sight in both rural and suburban landscapes. Small herds travel together, foraging for fruit, cactus pods, and anything else that they can find. And many desert towns are used to seeing peccaries move through neighborhoods at dawn or dusk. Historically, the distribution in the United States was more limited. Early records placed them mostly in southern Texas and parts of Arizona, but through the 20th century, they expanded northward and westward, likely helped by changes in land use and a warming climate. Today, they reach as far north as central Arizona and central Texas, and they occasionally appear outside of this range as individuals wander north or west. Reports of collared peccaries have come from California, Oklahoma, and Colorado, though no breeding populations are known from those states. Boas are not a group people usually connect with the United States at all, so it may surprise you to hear that there are 4 species of boa that naturally occur in the US. The best known are the rosy boas, which were once considered a single species but were recently split into 2. The desert rosy boa is found mostly in Mexico, especially on the Baja California Peninsula and along the Sonoran coast, but it reaches into the United States in a few small areas of extreme southwestern Arizona. It favors very dry, rocky desert canyons and scrublands, and its colors tend toward pale oranges, tans, and grays. Meanwhile, the coastal rosy boa is much more widespread in the United States. It lives across much of southern California and extends into parts of Nevada and western Arizona, where it can be found on rocky foothills, chaparral, and inland desert mountains. The species is often darker or more muted in coloration, with browns, grays, tans, and pale oranges. The 2 species look similar at first glance, but their scale patterns, body proportions, and genetics make the split well supported, and their ranges only meet at the very edges. The rubber boas follow a similar story. For decades, they were treated as one species, but work on their genetics and morphology has shown that they're actually 2 distinct species. The northern rubber boa is the more widespread of the 2. It lives across a huge stretch of the western United States, from California, Oregon, and Washington, through Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana, and it even reaches into parts of southern Canada. That northern extension makes it one of the most cold-tolerant boa species on Earth, with individuals active on nights that are only a few degrees above freezing. It's also the most northerly species of boa on Earth. Far to the south, isolated in the mountains of southern California, lives the southern rubber boa. This species is smaller on average, with a shorter tail, slightly different head proportions, and a different scale count than the northern variety. Its entire range is limited to a handful of mountain ranges. Most people know that the US has alligators, but far fewer realize that there's also a single species of true crocodile that lives in the country. The American crocodile reaches its northernmost limit in southern Florida, where small populations occupy the sheltered bays, coastlines, and mangrove swamps around Florida Bay and the Upper Keys. This species also ranges down through coastal Mexico, Central America, northern South America, and much of the Caribbean, and Florida sits right at the northern edge of their range. For much of the 20th century, crocodiles in the United States were extremely rare. Hunting and habitat loss reduced the Florida population to only a handful of nesting females by the 1970s. Once the species became legally protected and coastal habitat began to recover, the population slowly climbed. Today, American crocodiles number around 2,000 in Florida, with nesting recorded from the Keys to the canals surrounding the Turkey Point power plant. Although they're still concentrated in the extreme south of the state, individuals sometimes travel farther north than people expect. Juvenile crocodiles have been documented in Biscayne Bay and Miami River, and even parts of Broward County, showing that they occasionally explore well beyond their core range. Of course, the United States is home to plenty of species of spider, but the country is also home to roughly 30 native species of tarantula. Most live in the southern half of the country, stretching from California and Arizona across New Mexico and Texas, and in parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and even the southeast. They prefer warm, dry habitats, but several species push farther north than expected, occupying grasslands, scrublands, and open woodlands. Their diversity is also quite broad. The desert tarantula is widespread across the southwest, and is often the species people encounter on desert roads in late summer. The Texas brown tarantula ranges through central and northern Texas and up into Oklahoma and Arkansas, where it lives in grassy pastures and rocky outcrops rather than the classic desert terrain. California has its own set of species, including several that live at surprisingly high elevations or in coastal chaparral. Among this variety, the largest and most impressive species in the United States is the Arizona blonde tarantula. Females can live for decades and reach leg spans of more than 12.5 centimeters, making them one of the biggest spiders in North America. They build deep burrows in desert soils and often appear during the late summer mating season when males wander long distances at dusk in search of a mate. Tropical forests around the world have giant species of horned beetle, and among the largest are species in the genus Dynastes, with the most famous being the Hercules beetle. But the United States is home to two species from this genus, the eastern Hercules beetle and the western Hercules beetle, and they're among the largest species of insect in the United States. The eastern Hercules beetle lives in the woodlands of the eastern and southeastern United States, ranging from New York and Pennsylvania south through Florida and west into Missouri, Arkansas, and parts of Texas. Meanwhile, the western Hercules beetle is found in the higher, drier forests of the southwest, especially in Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Utah. Both species spend most of their lives as larvae inside decaying logs, where they feed on rotting wood for a year or more. Adult males of both species are strikingly large. Eastern Hercules beetles tend to be more yellow and can reach more than 6 centimeters in length, while western Hercules beetles tend to be more of a cream or gray color, and in captivity have been recorded reaching as much as 8 centimeters. Females of both species lack the oversized horns and are smaller and rounder, which means many people don't realize that they belong to the same species as the males. The adults feed on sap and overripe fruit, and the larvae help break down fallen logs. Despite their size and dramatic appearance, Hercules beetles are harmless. They're also surprisingly secretive. Most people living within their ranges will never see one at all, since adults are only active for a short time on warm summer nights. They're most commonly encountered when they're drawn to light near human settlements. The United States, especially the Appalachian region, has one of the highest diversities of salamanders anywhere in the world. Many of them are tiny, secretive species that most people never notice at all, living in the leaf litter, under logs, or along mountain streams. But with so many small, delicate salamanders in these forests, it's easy to assume that they all fit a similar mold. And then you meet the hellbender. The hellbender is the largest fully aquatic salamander in North America, reaching up to 75 centimeters in length. It has a broad, flattened head, tiny eyes, and loose folds of skin that ripple along its sides. The species looks almost prehistoric, and very similar to East Asia's giant salamanders, which are their closest living relatives. They live in clean, cool, fast-moving rivers from New York and Pennsylvania down through the Appalachian states and into parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia, with a separate population in Missouri. Because they spend their entire lives underwater, they take shelter beneath large flat rocks during the day and come out at night to hunt, mostly for crayfish. Their wrinkled skin helps them absorb oxygen from the water, which is why they need clear, well-oxygenated streams and disappear quickly when rivers become polluted or silted. Hellbenders are also remarkably long-lived, often surviving for more than 30 years in the wild. many individuals spend decades beneath the same rock. For most, the surprise isn't just their size. It's the realization that one of the most unusual and ancient-looking salamanders on Earth has been living quietly in the rivers around them this entire time. And that's it for this week's video. What species surprised you most? Let me know in the comments below. I need to say a special thanks to my patrons. Without their ongoing support, I wouldn't be able to make a video like this every week. If you want to support the channel, consider joining us on Patreon. The link is in the video description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.